it's always about the here and now to a large extent. You're not going to get a free pass, even if Ten Hag signed a 3-year contract.
The topic of Old Trafford naming rights, inflated ticket prices, contract extensions, and exploratory talks with major financial institutions. This has all happened since last Friday, and it's all coming up on today's show. It's your latest episode of the Theatre of Red. As supporters of this majestic football club, we are never short of a talking point or two. However, this week has supplied its fair share of topics, with everything from the potential return of a legendary figure to the prospect of eating the world's hottest pies in a ground called something other than Old Trafford. A man who has shared my curiosity about the week's events has served time with the Manchester Evening News, Guardian Sport and the BBC, knowing a thing or two about Manchester United Football Club. Mr. Dominic Booth, how are things with you today, sir?
Very good, thank you. And thanks for that big build-up. I feel privileged to be here.
Absolutely, and you deserve it. But first and foremost, we need to address the elephant here. You have had to endure a bout of dreaded man flu this week. Are you over the worst of it before we go on?
I don't know what's been worse, man flu or watching England's performances at the Euros. It's been a close run thing between the two things. This is quite nice to talk about United and let off some steam, really. So, yeah, it's been not the best week for me personally.
Did you ever imagine saying that line, talking about United would be letting off some steam?
In the transfer window, it's all hope and new beginnings, isn't it? It's none of the drudgery that clouded last season. So that all seems like a distant memory.
Absolutely. When Adam Crafton released his piece in The Athletic on Wednesday afternoon, a wounded supporter base, I think is fair to say, was slightly concerned by the trio of topics that were raised. Front and centre, obviously, is Old Trafford, with the unknown variable about a refurbishment or a fresh build, and the potential implications of a sale of naming rights with the latter. Given the potential fallout, Sir Jim Ratcliffe appears to be sticking to his words that he spoke about during his Bloomberg interview about making unpopular decisions for the overall benefit of the club. Considering your background, how does the prospect of a sale of naming rights for Old Trafford sit with you personally?
Yeah, it doesn't sit great. And I think a lot of United fans, people who've been associated with the club for a long time will say the same. I mean, I think the second paragraph of that Adam Crafton piece you're talking about, it said, that there's American banks that are going to be covering some of the finances involved. That kind of sets off alarm bells as well. The links to big financial institutions in America that were associated with the Glazers. I mean, the one thing the Glazers never did was to sell the naming rights of Old Trafford. I think this is an area that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to have to tread very, very carefully on, because I think it can get United fans' backs up. And I thought that initially when he was talking about a complete rebuild of the stadium, because my preference has always been renovation at Old Trafford and keep the sort of original features of Old Trafford. If you're talking about it in selling a house and that kind of terms, you want those original features, don't you? I'm just a bit concerned that this is another step towards that, departure from Old Trafford, departure from the name, departure from the ground where it was. It seems like these are business decisions, and you expect Sir Jim Ratcliffe to make business decisions, but there has to be a level of respect for the traditions of Old Trafford, and the name is probably top of those traditions for me. I don't know what you think.
It will always remain Old Trafford, regardless of whether or not somebody implies for sponsorship reasons that it's going to be something other than that. It's going to remain Old Trafford for everybody. But there was also the suggestion in that piece, in the event of a refurbishment, that United would retain the name Old Trafford but seek to have an associated partner. And with that, I suppose you would have something similar to what Barcelona have done. Now, along the lines of that, it's money for nothing and for sponsorship ideals and for articles and reports that are going to be released by the club. You're going to have an associated partner alongside the name. But even with that, I think the vast majority, if not everybody, will just continue to name the ground Old Trafford. But as you said, and it is the fundamental thing in this, it's a very dodgy area for Sir Jim Ratcliffe to be entering into. You're looking at one stage He's entering into contractual negotiations with a very popular manager after an FA Cup win. It's appeasing himself to the supporters base, and it's ticking the right boxes. He had the interview with Bloomberg during the week where he said a lot of positive things, speaking about an entire regeneration of the area of Manchester and seeking, we'll say, council appropriation to be able to do so and to be able to benefit the entire area as a whole. These are positive things to be saying. The one thing that did stand out in it to me was when they were continuously referencing the comparative between politics and Manchester United. He referenced the importance of making unpopular decisions for the overall benefit of the club. When you have that, the second issue that raised large amounts of concern was the possibility of a ticket price inflation. And that is aimed at funding the nature of the project at hand with regards to the stadium. Now, that would, of course, follow 2 5% increases since the beginning of the 2022-23 campaign. And the majority of supporters that I have spoken to, they feel slightly aggrieved with this news. In one particular section, a prominent member of one of the largest supporters clubs on the planet was particularly upset with the news. And I quote them in saying, further ticket price rises, given the economic climate that fans are struggling in with the cost of living crisis, it would be very, very hard to stomach. Now, given that, what is your general stance on the prospect of a third increase following 11 consecutive years of price freezes?
Yeah, it's a little bit tone deaf, and it's not what drives the main chunk of United's revenue for a start. Ticket sales, there's broadcasting rights account for a vast majority of profits and the revenue that the club records. So, in an era where that just seems to only be going up and up, and the latest deal it went up even more from the previous, astronomic rise. It's not something that you would think Sir Jim Ratcliffe needs to do. And like I say, he's making business decisions. Does he need to make that one? I would argue absolutely not. And like you say, lots of price freezes in the what you would call the Glazer era. So, again, those comparisons are there to be drawn about who's making the better decisions. And obviously the one thing that everyone believes Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe will do is improve United's fortunes on the pitch. So what's the price to be paid for that? I don't believe it's an increase in ticket prices for sure.
It may, of course, all turn out to be a non-player based on the revelations that the club has held exploratory talks with major financial institutions, as you mentioned, including the Bank of America. Now, obviously, neither the club nor the Bank have opted to comment on that. But the name alone, when you're referencing financial institutions in America, that alone is enough to send shivers down the spines of supporters, particularly when there is no clarity about where the debt would be landed. When we're looking at a guy who appears to be level-headed in bringing the club forward to match the fortunes of Real Madrid, surely a trio of these particular scenarios that Adam Crafton labelled are not the way to get yourself up and running when you've got X amount of individuals still on gardening leave.
No, it's a little bit baffling. It's you've got to see how this thing pans out. Nothing has actually been decided. Adam Crafton's report is very detailed and it's true to form really, and it mentions that task force, including Gary Neville and Andy Burnham, I think, and Sebastian Coe, talking about the Wembley of the North idea, and that's an idea I broadly get behind. I know it's got the backs up of other fans around the country who don't want taxpayers' money to be going into new stadium for United, which I do understand, and all these other bits and bobs. It's dangerous if it goes the way that it could do. But I think at the moment there is a general trust in Ratcliffe and Ineos to do the right things, and they've made enough noises that I still believe that they probably will. It's good that these conversations are probably being had at this stage, the exploratory talks, as you say, and that the supporters, trusts and clubs have got involved as well. So that's more promising. I do think that these things will probably... Well, I don't think we're going to end up with United playing at the Amazon Stadium and playing in a different colour and fans being charged £200 a ticket. I can't see all of that happening at once. One interesting thing I would say regarding the previous point is that down the road from Old Trafford, there is a stadium that is called Emirates Old Trafford, and that's the cricket stadium, which has obviously done that hybrid naming thing with the sponsor and keeping the old name in it as well. And as you said about the football ground, everyone refers to the cricket Old Trafford as Old Trafford as well. No one really calls it Emirates Old Trafford. officially it is known as that. So it's one of those, isn't it?
It is, and all of these talking points really transcend from the end of season review, from the Ineos ideals of a best-in-class environment. While the British billionaire has obviously confirmed that the manager is not the sole issue at the club, instead it has come down to the sum of a chain of moving parts that ultimately establishes a suitable working environment for the coaching staff, for the players, and everybody involved with the club. But furthermore, he has stated that the players choose the manager. And I thought that was a very, very enlightening line that was passed up an awful lot during that Bloomberg interview. And it's one which is ultimately a tremendous show of faith for Erik ten Hag. At the time of recording, as we are speaking now, we're anticipating a contract extension for the Dutchman alongside the arrival of some truly, truly elite individuals to join his coaching staff. First and foremost, before we really, really elaborate on this, how does the prospect of Ruud van Nistelrooy returning to Old Trafford sit with you?
Tugs on my heartstrings. That's the first thing I've got to say. I have Van Nistelrooy in the back of my shirts when I was a 7-8-year-old going to Old Trafford in the early noughties. I think it can't help but be drawn towards that piece of news and feel like it's a really nice thing. Also, Van Nistelrooy's got a hell of a coaching record. He's been head coach of PSV, and he's allegedly turning down the Burnley job to come and be in United's backroom staff. So it's a bit of a coup, I think. Actually, it's a bit of a coup from both an emotional and a technical standpoint. So well on board with that. Well on board with the other changes that I believe are in the works as well to the coaching staff. That's undergoing a review, as every other part of the football club has undergone in the Ineos era already. The only thing that I'm questioning, and I haven't questioned this on social media yet, I'll put it to you though. Why does Erik ten Hag need a contract extension? He has got another year to run in his deal. The jury is still out. We can all agree that the jury is still out after an 8th place finish and a minus goal difference. Okay, United have made the decision to keep him. I have mixed thoughts on that, and I've made that quite apparent on social media. I think that he's quite lucky, but maybe it will be proven right. But what happens if United lose 5 of their first 10 games and they're in the bottom half of the table and they're out of a cup or something by October, November? What happens then? And that's particularly an issue if you've handed him a new contract. I think it seems a little bit premature to be doing that.
It is a perfectly valid point, and it is a point that I actually raised last week when I was speaking with Simon Lloyd. You're looking at it at one avenue. Erik ten Hag has until the end of this season coming, with an option for a 12-month extension. Yeah. So you take it and you say, okay, the club hasn't officially come out. The club hasn't officially made a statement about any managerial search, interviews, about the future of Erik ten Hag. Everything has been leaked or has been media speculation. You've decided, for whatever particular reason, to remain with the manager. Allow him to have the season. As you said, if they open up with the first 5-6 games, results are catastrophic, all of a sudden, this morale that's been built up after the FA Cup final starts diminishing. You're now in a situation where you're looking at a reported 3 years with the option for a further 12 months. And then should you make a decision to part ways, then obviously there's going to be a larger payoff. And then you're looking at the profit and sustainability rules. I do agree with you in a sense that I found the motion to go from interviewing candidates to increasing the current manager's contract a little bit odd. But then at the same time, I've always drawn back on the same thing, that the club never officially came out and said anything. The only person and the only official line from the club all along was what Erik ten Hag had told the press. You must remember in the week leading up to the FA Cup final, when questions started coming out, the only noise coming from the club was from Erik ten Hag. And in fairness to him, from day one, he did say he was told that the club wants to build alongside him. Maybe it is as straightforward as what Erik ten Hag was saying.
Van Nistelrooy did well, surrounded by white shirts and still going. What a run by Ruud van Nistelrooy! What a goal this could be! They could close the betting on goal of the month for March, maybe even the season. Ruud van Nistelrooy with a very, very special effort.
Oh, what a goal. I remember that so well, and I remember celebrating that like it was yesterday. Now, we've touched on Ruud van Nistelrooy and the obvious nostalgia that this move could potentially offer. But even outside of the wonderful memories that bringing back that legendary striker will unlock, he brings with him a real coaching pedigree that not only aligns with Erik ten Hag's philosophies, but the two of them share the same attacking tactical principles. And just how beneficial do you feel that his presence is going to be if and when he makes that move, when we're focusing solely on the progression of Rasmus Højlund?
Absolutely. And Rasmus Højlund was a huge investment by United that, is still yet to fully pay off. We've all seen promise from him. And I think most United fans are big fans of Højlund and have got a lot of patience with him. But over the course of last season, we saw his inadequacies compared to, a ready-made signing like Harry Kane would have been. And obviously United didn't want to pay the premium for Kane. They didn't want to get involved in that. So they saw his age as a problem. They went after Højlund, the much younger option, but one for the future. And it makes sense to make a hire in Van Nistelrooy that helps with that. I also think Van Nistelrooy will help people like Garnacho and Ahmad, because he knows where strikers want the ball, and his expertise was always in getting in those right positions. And he had perfect relationships with people like Paul Scholes, Van Nistelrooy, Beckham when he was playing, getting the ball exactly where he wanted. And United have been very, very poor at getting the ball to Rasmus Højlund in goal-scoring areas. All the stats will tell you as much. He had far fewer goal-scoring opportunities than all of his peers across the top 6-8 teams, strikers in those teams last season. So Van Nistelrooy is going to be absolutely massive. And it does make sense, like you say, about the succession planning, but you would still have to pay the compensation to Ten Hag. And that still doesn't make business sense to give him a new contract, even if you think, well, Rene Hake or Van Nistelrooy can step in. If we want to get rid of him, you still have to pay him, a 3-year deal or whatever you're going to give him. So, yeah, I have mixed feelings. I like the sort of super squadron that Ineos are building behind the scenes. But the most important things are the manager and the playing squad, and the question marks around both.
It was something that I was going to ask you, because obviously in following one another on social media, you can see the various points and the topics that are made. And you do have an opinion that I'm not going to say totally differs, but slightly differs from what a lot of other people have online regarding the managerial situation. And in fairness to you, you've kept it from day dot. I wanted to ask you, what did you think on the day when David Ornstein announced that Erik ten Hag was staying? Were you pleased, or how did you generally feel about it all?
I sort of felt numb. I can't say that I felt anything strong. My inclination was always that I thought it was a perfect time for United to make the change because of the new ownership, the way the season had gone, the fact that the squad, the nature of the squad, and how young it is, and how there is an opportunity this summer to properly replenish that squad, to clear out deadwood, to build around the likes of Garnacho, Mainu, Højlund, a couple of others, probably Dalot and Arna, Keith Fernandez. But other than that, you have this massive rebuild that can be done. And my issue was do you entrust that with a manager who's just led you to your worst ever Premier League finish and who has recorded a negative goal difference? And it wasn't even just that last season. I'm sure you agree with this. It wasn't even the results. It was the nature of the performances week after week. And I can't believe this sort of got a free pass from the United Twitter following, which is usually the harshest audience of any that I could think of. Maybe the England Twitter following this summer with the Euros, that they're a pretty harsh bunch as well. I can't believe that I got such a free pass, those performances. And that for me is still a stain on Ten Hag's record. I absolutely will give him, a fresh slate in the summer as much as possible. But you must agree that those performances, they still hang heavy over Ten Hag. Some of them I just can't get out of my head. And Brentford away, Palace away, I can't get those out of my head.
I understand. The performances over many, many courses of the season, they were the furthest thing from acceptable. I stand by everything that I've said in recent weeks on this podcast, that football supporters are obviously some of the most fickle individuals on the planet. I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm any different. We're all football supporters, but the nature of football supporters, especially on social media, is so fickle. And there was so much emphasis drawn on these polls that happened after the FA Cup final about how, are you Erik ten Hag in? Are you Ten Hag out? And there was such a monumental cry out for the manager to stay. I think it would have been very, very interesting if you had gone back several weeks after Selhurst Park at that capitulation against Crystal Palace and the nature of how the team capitulated. I can't imagine the figures would have been anywhere similar to that, and that really emphasises the fickle nature of what we're speaking about. I don't give the manager a pass for tactical decisions that were made during the season, for substitutions, for what appeared at certain stages to be an unwillingness to deviate from a tactical mindset. And then obviously when he had the interview with Gary Neville, he stated that he was hesitant about changing from the tactical mindset because if he does so, he's been focusing so much time and effort into his squad to be able to adhere to those principles that it becomes difficult to be able to, I suppose, fine-tune them into another way of thinking. I mean, ultimately, that's management, isn't it? And I said that from the day dot, that you have to be able to adapt. It's not just a situation of fitting square pegs into round holes all the time and just hoping that eventually it's going to come to fruition. Because obviously, I am a supporter of Erik ten Hag. Even though I'm not going to give him a pass on certain things, I am more so a supporter of the manager of Manchester United and wanting to be able to back a project and stability. I do not see the benefit of hiring a manager and sacking them 18 months later, hiring a manager, sacking them 18 months later. I think you have to reach a certain point, regardless of what has occurred. And you have to say, well, why did we bring this manager here in the first place? There were certain endearing qualities and traits that that manager possessed that we wanted him here in the first place. Because whatever you say about a fickle fan base, I don't think there was too many people that were against the idea of United chasing Ajax for their manager when we were trying to get Erik ten Hag in the first place, because he was the primary candidate there. I like to focus on that while also noting the amount of variables that he had to deal with throughout the course of the season. Because as we discussed last week, those injuries, I know everyone had injuries, but really and truly, the injuries to key footballers that we will discuss about one of them in a couple of moments, I do think this was downplayed by certain sections of the media, because the injuries to Lisandro Martinez, to Luke Shaw, those two players alone, they are core players for this Manchester United side, and they really and truly affect the entire dynamic of the squad. So I looked at it, Dominic, and I said, yes, you're wrong with A, B, and C. However, there is so many variables that lead to this and ultimately lead to momentum falling down that I was willing to look past it. Now, you can call me deluded, but I know it kind of plays against what you were saying. But throughout your thought process, Dominic, did you look at it, even with the issues hanging over his head and the doubts that you had, did you factor the amount of variables that he was playing against?
I think the injuries is a fair enough one to bring up. And he always did bring that up in interviews and press conferences. And that must have backed it into the review that Ineos conducted, because they obviously conducted that review. And I tweeted at the time, it's hard, I think I said, it's hard not to think that this review has been influenced by one game. And that was the FA Cup final, obviously. And that was a nagging doubt at the back of my mind. Has this been done on the hoof after we beat City? And, it was a fantastic day, fantastic performance. Absolute all-time post-Ferguson, one of the all-time days post-Ferguson. But what I came to the conclusion was it must have been the injuries, the fact that he didn't get all the players that he wanted in previous transfer windows, the sort of stark drop-off of form of certain individuals that, can't really be easily explained, like Casemiro and Rashford, and, lack of a centre-forward other than Højlund, completely zero options other than Højlund. And like you say, the two big absences of Shaw and Martinez for almost the entire season. No backup in Malacia. So, fair. I think fair enough. All those are completely justifiable, not excuses, but like you say, variables that you had to work with.
When we mentioned Luke Shaw, it would be pretty ridiculous for us not to touch on the Euros when we're right at the meat and gravy stage of it now. Obviously ahead of England's tie with Slovakia on Sunday. I want to get the full breakdown from a supporter, because from my side, it's been limp, it's been uninspiring, it's been devoid of ideas throughout. And while one man does not solve every issue, you'd have to think that Luke Shaw would be offering an awful lot more in attacking phases for Southgate's side. And I think it really emphasises his importance to England, and also, as we've just discussed, to Manchester United in attacking phases and with Marcus Rashford. But given what we have witnessed throughout the campaign gone by and what you're seeing with England, where do you put your finger on it? What exactly is happening?
I am Mr. Positive when it comes to England. I love tournament football. I love following England in tournaments. And it's last few years have been an absolute brilliant ride. It's been far more enjoyable following England in recent years than United. But this tournament feels like the bad old days for England, and that sort of Roy Hodgson, Fabio Capello era of following England, which was absolutely awful. And yeah, Luke Shaw is absolutely huge because he offers something that no other player, and this is Southgate's fault, no other player in the squad can offer what Luke Shaw does. Why he hasn't selected a Ben Chilwell or a Tyrick Mitchell or someone to play left back, I've got absolutely no idea. But then it's a strange mirroring, isn't it, of what happened to United with Diogo Dalot and Wan-Bissaka playing left back for much of the season, and that odd decision not to retain Sergio Reguilon beyond January. I mean, I was no great fan of Reguilon, to be honest. I thought he had serious limitations as a footballer, and there was one game where I think it was against Bayern Munich away, actually, where Reguilon and Pellistri were widely lauded by the United fans on social media, and I kind of thought, is this what we sunk to? That these two are getting praise just because they're trying and they're running around and they're putting effort in, and that's all fair enough, but they really weren't offering much more than that. United desperately need Luke Shaw fit at the start of the season. England desperately need him fit on Sunday, basically. I think he gets better the more he doesn't play, though. I think that is the thing with Luke Shaw. We have known him to have these spells of horrible form where he almost plays his way out of teams and plays his way out of the national squad, and he plays another left back into the United team, like an Alex Telles or a Malacia. So it's one of those with Shaw. I've always been a big fan of his. It'd be very interesting if he can hit the ground running with United and England when he gets fit again.
And a huge topic with Luke Shaw that has to be mentioned in this as well is obviously the lack of Marcus Rashford in this squad. And you have to think, given how well Marcus Rashford played in the previous season, that had Luke Shaw to be available throughout this year for Manchester United, you would like to think that Rashford would have benefited the most and that he could very well be at that tournament right now and he could be supplying a massively needed differential on that left wing for Gareth Southgate's side. Is that a fair assessment?
I think Marcus Rashford should be at this tournament regardless. I think he should have been selected even off the back of the season that he had, because he offers something on that left-hand side which very few England players offer. And he's done it in tournaments for England in the past. That he's done it in big games for United on the biggest stage. He always thrives in those bigger games, actually. Goals against City, Liverpool, PSG moments. He's a big game player, and he's had a poor season, but he must be sitting at home thinking he could have offered something to the squad. And it is a tantalising prospect that he and Shaw could return to fitness and form next season for United. You've probably discussed Rashford and all the very, very many ifs and buts around him and around his future, his contract and everything like that on previous issues. But from a pure footballing perspective, those two in perfect harmony is a wonderful thought, really, and it makes you hopeful for the new season. Like I said, in the summer, you can afford to have all these hopes and dreams about the club season to come, can't you?
Exactly. And what that would also offer, it would offer complete and utter stability on the left-hand side of United's field. When you're looking at the improvements that we've had in 12 months with the development of Diogo Dalot and Alejandro Garnacho, when Garnacho plays out right, and even when Amad Diallo has come in on the right-hand side, they've offered something different and they've offered a surety, particularly when Diogo Dalot has improved as much as he has. And you now have a right back that maybe you don't have to go out and replace because his improvement has been so stellar. And even though he's been there for so long, he's still a young man. I want to ask you one final question, and it's deviating away from England and looking at United. With everything we've discussed, and with your apprehension about, we'll say, the squad with Erik ten Hag, what we now know, and assuming we've got a fit squad with some suitable acquisitions during the summer, Ruud van Nistelrooy comes in with Hake. We have this elite, best-in-class coaching environment with a manager who has been backed by Ineos. What is a successful season next season for you?
That's such a huge question. It is a huge question. I've thought about this actually in the past few weeks, and I do think it has to be the top four. I wouldn't worry about any trophies. I somewhat subscribe to the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer school of thought in that trophies can sometimes mask your progress or lack of. I think that certainly happened under Mourinho when he won the League Cup and the Europa League. I think United actually went backwards in that time. I know Mourinho has a lot of fans, and I'm probably among the dissenters on that one. But United have to perform in the league. They have to have a positive goal difference, ideally 10, 15 plus goal difference. They have to lose 7, 8 games max, and they have to be in the top four and qualify for the Champions League. Even if it's a 5th place Champions League, okay, fair enough, but you still want to see consistency of performances. And that's the key thing. Top four would be great. It has to be consistently coherent performances, tactically spot on. And then you have all those things in the background that ease the nerves about the future. All the stuff that Jim Ratcliffe's doing and Ineos are building, all the stuff we spoke about at the start with the stadium. Hoping that they go in the right direction and carry United forward. The two have to coexist. You can't forget about what's on the pitch and say, "Oh, we're building for the future." Because with United, it's always about the here and now to a large extent. You're not going to get a free pass, and even if Ten Hag signed a 3-year contract, he's not going to get a free pass. United have to start putting it together, and yeah, that's the pressure that we all know exists around United, and it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds because everyone's on trial. Even Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, they're on trial. Ten Hag's new coaching staff, if they come in, the new players that come in, everyone's proving themselves.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, and it is in about right what I would agree with as well. What have you got coming up over the next few weeks and months?
Cheers, Shaun. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of stuff with the BBC at the moment over the Euros and the Olympics. So, yeah, branching out a little bit away from football once the Euros are done. So that'll be quite nice just to watch some cricket as well and watch some Olympics because sometimes you can have too much football.
I don't know if I'll agree with that, but yeah, it's,
Well,
nice. It's nice to broaden the horizon. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way they can do so?
I'm on social media at DomBooth19, and yeah, my DMs are usually open, I think. But yeah, I'm always happy to engage in some United chat with whoever. It's always, as you said at the start, even in this quite quiet week of United, there's never a shortage of a talking point.
And isn't that the truth? And
all the better for it.
All the better for it. And for you listening, if you are still here up to now, please hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening, and it will help us out more than you know. You can get in touch with the channel at theatre_of_red or myself at Shaun Connolly 85 on Twitter or X. Always happy to engage with any listeners. Thank you for sharing the time with us. Enjoy the weekend of football, and we'll catch you all next week.